do you ever have an opportunity to basically not slack off, but have fun on the job, or to do something kind of fun or out of the ordinary while you're working? And under normal circumstances, the answer is no. The reason why is because usually when I'm called in for a job, it's for a specific task. Like, I need you to come in today, and basically, I have a whole bunch of computers that need to be fixed, or I have a machine that has to be set up and issued to a user, or I have a whole bunch of computers that need to be set for to destroy, or something along those lines. That's typically most of the time that I'm working. It's usually for a specific task, and it's usually I need you to come in. I need you to do this very specific task, and then I need you to then the day is over, and in which case that's exactly what I'll do. I'll come in, I'll do the job, in the time within the expected time, or to the best of my abilities, and then the job is done. The job is done, and I'm paid, and that's the end of it. And then hopefully I get another job. But occasionally I have been called in for period assignments, meaning like, well, we need you to come in for 2 weeks, and we need you to work 9 to 5, something along those lines. Typically, I very rarely get calls in for that, but there have been times when I have gotten calls for that sort of thing. In that case, typically, you're usually called in to either beef up the support staff that they have for a period of time, or to replace somebody that's called in on vacation or called in sick. In which case, you're working in a specific spot, a specific area for a specific period of time. And usually, you're going to get assigned tasks, but most of the time is you're going to be sitting and waiting for a task to come in. And obviously when the task comes in, you stop everything and you go and do that task, and you complete the task, and then you go back and you basically wait for another task to come in. And typically speaking, most of the jobs that I've done have basically been, you go from task to task to task until the day is over, and then the next day you basically go from task to, that's typically speaking what I've done. But every once in a while, I have been called in for a period assignment where there's been a gap between task to task. Or there's an opportunity to basically do something a little fun with the work that you're dealing with. Obviously, I keep up to date with all the latest technology and all the latest technology news. Typically speaking, if I know and I know when all the major events are happening, like E3 or CES or PAX or something along those lines, Gamescom, that sort of thing. If I know a major event is coming up, where I know there's going to be major technology announcements, I typically will not take a job on those days. And the reason why is because, at least in the long term, it is more useful for me to simply either delay or reject a job, and to have the opportunity to firsthand witness, important information that I will clearly be, in need of knowing, than it is for me to simply, to instead do a job and miss out on that news, possibly completely miss out on that news, because sometimes after a broadcast is done, it's not repeated. That does happen, or you miss something that doesn't end up in the, that sort of thing. But every once in a while, fun things, there are fun events that are going on. And sometimes I have to take long-term positions where there are things that I otherwise would have watched that overlap, that I can't because they overlap with the job that I'm currently doing. And there was one time when I was working in a new building was being assembled. They had just finished the building. They had hired staff. They had prepared everything. However, even though the building was finished, most of the major equipment had not been installed, particularly all the computer equipment and all the network equipment. Now, I wasn't called in to do any of the network equipment, but I was called in to basically assemble all of the computer equipment and set up all the computer equipment in the entire building. Basically going from room to room, office to office, installing computers and installing computer equipment and testing them to make sure that they work. So that was clearly a 2-week job. We knew it was, in fact, they concerned it might have actually been a 3-week job. We ended up doing it in 2 weeks. We were that efficient. And but again, the assignment was, we need you to be setting up these offices and these rooms and making sure that all the equipment that we have assigned for these rooms they have all the proper equipment that we've ordered for these rooms, and that all that equipment is functional. And if it's not, then either try to fix it, and if you can't, obviously notify somebody so we can get new, we can replace that equipment, because of course it's all new, so it's all under warranty. Meaning if they had gotten a piece of equipment or a screen or something like that was broken, they obviously wanted to know, because they can just RMA it or something along those lines. Obviously, if I had opened up a brand new machine and I couldn't get it to work because it was dead, they knew it wasn't my fault. They knew it was probably destroyed in shipping. Or it was defective in manufacturing. And of course, they would get a replacement, no big deal. So for 2 weeks, that was my job. And it just so happened that during one of the final days of that job, happened to overlay with that year's Pokemon Pokemon World Championships, actually. Now, the Pokemon World Championships is kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. I consider it an esport event. I think it was if anything, it was probably one of the very first esport events. And I've reported about it on my YouTube channel before. Basically, they take the best Pokemon players in the entire world for the TCG, and of course the video game, and now of course the Pokken players, the Pokken tournament players, to basically see who's going to be the very best, like no one ever was. And now, of course, it's been expanded for more games, and it probably will be expanded for next year even more. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. In fact, I think a major event was happening this past weekend, in fact, for the trading card game. They were splitting up, but that's not important. Needless to say, I wanted to watch this event, and of course I couldn't, because obviously, and with time zones the way they were, the event happened to overlap with my time zone's working hours. So I figured, not the end of the world if I don't get a chance to see this event. It'd be nice if I could see this event, but think of it like this. Imagine the World Series was happening while you were working. That's how this event was for me. If I had missed it, obviously I'm going to be professional, but if I could watch it, I'd want to catch it. No big deal, obviously. But it just so happened that on this particular day, which I believe was day one of the event, we were assigned a rather large PC computer area. And this was a room that was going to have, particularly they needed to set up lots of laptops, and they needed to set up a projector, at least one or two projectors for this particular area. And it was an open area, which means that anybody working the building, and by the way, the building was staffed, but the staff was basically working on getting the building up and running. The intention, I guess, was for the building to be fully functional by, I think, a week or two from from that day. Don't have me wrong, there was staff there to basically get their odds and ends in order, essentially, and learn how their equipment was once we had them up and running. But, majority of the people who were there were either my people or other staff, janitors, construction people, that sort of stuff. But it was an open air area, which means that anybody passing through would see us working, which was, again, this was no big deal. So, essentially speaking, our priority was to set up that projection system. So again, anybody in that area could work. Now, for those of you who have seen my previous videos, you guys know I'm of a mind where I learned how to assemble computers and how to work networks basically playing video games. I didn't learn any of my skills in school, because when I was in school, even though it wasn't as long ago as you think it was, we were still using educational systems, or we were still based on educational standards that were written in tablets and papyrus, either written on stone tablets or later transferred to papyrus. There was no conversations at all or curriculum that was computer related. That might have changed, but in more recent times, but when I was in school, using a computer was considered goofing off. And the funny thing is, of course, is that, and I'm sorry to tell all of you current day parents, and I will say it again, I learned more goofing off than I ever did in school, or what you would consider goofing off. Because all the stuff that I was doing on this job, setting up computers, setting up computer labs, putting in operating systems on them, testing them, I all learned because obviously those were the same skills that I had to learn those skills. I learned those bare minimum skills just to be able to play video games like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so here I am basically assembling an office building, a multimedia room, using the same skills that I had learned, 20 years prior when I was like 15, when I was a kid, to play games of Quake or Unreal against my friends. And so it's not for me, and certainly for the people that were assigned for the job, it wasn't a difficult job. We all knew what we were doing. We were all on point. But it was a kind of boring job. It was like, because it's like, yes, it would take, but it's like, okay, so we're flashing this image and we're putting Windows on this machine, or we're setting up this Google, like, what is this formatted for? Is it a Google Chrome? Is it a PC laptop? Who is this going to? It's just, checking the boxes and making sure everything's running. So it's obvious that we had some, spare things. And one of our supervisors came in and said, look, we have to make sure that this projector that you've just installed, we just got, you just got a PC on it, so we're appreciating that you got this thing on. It turns on, no problem. You've got the Windows operating system on it, no problem. We're all happy with what you've done. But we have to make sure that all the multimedia functions in this room function. And that means that we're going to be using this thing for audio and video displays, which means we have to make sure that this system that the audio and video systems that we've installed, that you're hooking into, are functional. So if it's not too much trouble, can you put some audio and video on these screens so that we can make sure that these are in fact functional machines, so that when next week comes, these guys, when they try to play their presentations, are all good. And I said, say no more. And I typed up on the computer, I pulled up the Google Chrome browser, and I said, go to twitch.tv/Pokemon. Their firewall was 15 years old, because they had websites like Yahoo blocked, but any website that was made within the last, 10 years was not on their banned list, and twitch.tv was one of them. In fact, I think even YouTube was working. You could get YouTube working, no problem. But God forbid I try to read bluesnews.com or something. That was forbidden. But Twitch TV went right through. And within like 5 seconds, the live feed of the Pokemon Championships went up on the big screen projector that they had. It was probably like at least a good, it was good. The screen was blown up. It was projected on a wall, so anybody in that atrium could see it, and we had large speakers plugged in so they could hear it too. So I cook it up, and everybody immediately is like, "Well, what's this?" I said, "Oh, it's just a feed." And they're like, "Oh, is this like an esports?" I said, "Yeah, this is esports." Oh, they're like, "Oh, competitive Pokemon," and I think they were playing Pokemon Go competitively. It had just entered beta. This was a closed, invitational only Pokemon Go competitive tournament. I think they had celebrities playing and stuff like that. They were just about to release, obviously, the Pokemon Go League to the main game. But this was like the first time we had gotten our hands on. And this was pretty interesting for me to watch. It wasn't like the most interesting thing in the world for me to watch, but it was interesting to see that this was going to be possible. So I left it up, and I didn't think too much of it. And we continued working. A couple hours pass. We're still working. The feed's still going. A couple more hours pass. By the way, our supervisors are passing by us. Nobody's saying a word. we're working on our Chromebooks. We have our Chrome, we're working on our PC laptops. We're getting our desktops working because we're working in this room. We had at least 40 machines. Actually, let me rephrase this. We had like 40 machines of one type that we were expected to complete, and probably 200 of different other types of machines that we were expected to get up and running, and all ready to go. And again, we could do that, but it was going to take us all day. And it was going to take all of us working together. But again, they had assigned us for this task, and we were going to do it. End of the day, task is done. I think that probably about an hour or so before the day is over, one of our supervisors asks, "What's this on the screen?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, they asked us to test to make sure that this was working. I just put this feed up. If you're having a problem with it or something, I'll turn it off. We were just told, make sure that this is working." And we were, it's working fine, by the way. So if you want us to shut it off, we can totally shut it off. And also, I knew for a fact that it's a Pokemon event. There's nothing that's going to be vulgar, because this is an Eat for Everyone game, basically. So they had standards for, like, obviously nobody's going to be swearing. Nobody's going to be showing, this is not violent. This is not going to be showing, you're not going to be seeing boobs or violence or anything like that. It's just people playing video games that, it's Pokemon. So that might have had something to do with the fact that nobody was really asking us what the heck am I seeing on the screen. I'm sure if they were playing competitive Gears of War, maybe somebody would have said something, but yeah, no. Oh, so somebody was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, obviously the day is just about over. So if you can start, shutting some of this equipment off or put it into standby. Obviously, we're just about ready to pack up for the day. So if you could just start shutting all this stuff off and locking everything up, we'll get you going." Nobody was mad, and that was like one of our last days. I think that was like maybe our last day of work, actually. And they're like, "Oh yeah, you guys are all good. We'll sign I'll sign. Make sure everything is all," because this was our supervisors, right? And like they're all like, "Yeah, you guys are good. Have a nice one. You guys are gonna get, we'll make sure that you guys get taken care of for doing this job."